The human with no hope found an alien bride, and her gift changed the fate of his world. The broken wanderer, the dust never settled anymore. It just hung in the air like a shroud, turning the sun into a dim copper disk that barely warmed the cracked earth below. Marcus Thorne pulled his tattered scarf tighter around his face and trudged through what had once been the Verde River Valley. Now it was just another scar on the planet's dying body, a maze of dried mud and skeletal trees that clawed uselessly at the gray sky. He'd been a botanist once, back when that word meant something. Back when there were universities and research grants and the foolish belief that science could save them. That was before the resource wars, before the ecosystems collapsed like dominoes, before hope became just another extinct species. Marcus kicked at a stone, watching it skitter across the hardpan. His canteen was nearly empty, his last protein bar reduced to crumbs in his pack. He was heading toward the ruins of Millerton, where rumor suggested a settlement still had a working water purifier. Probably just wishful thinking, but wishful thinking was all that kept feet moving these days. The wind picked up, carrying with it the acrid smell of distant fires. Marcus squinted against the stinging particles and nearly missed it, a glint of something that wasn't brown or gray. Something blue-white and crystalline, jutting from the riverbed like a broken tooth. His scientific curiosity, dormant for so long, flickered to life. The object was partially buried, maybe 20 feet long, with a surface that seemed to shift and shimmer even under the muted sunlight. Not metal, not glass, something organic, almost like nacre, but with patterns that hurt his eyes when he looked at them too long. Marcus approached cautiously, his hand instinctively reaching for the rusty knife at his belt. Up close he could see it was a vessel of some kind. A pod maybe, or an escape craft. And there, a seam barely visible running along its length. His fingers found the edge and the material felt warm, almost alive. When he pressed harder, the seam suddenly widened with a soft exhalation of air that smelled like rain and growing things. Marcus stumbled backward, heart hammering. Inside, cushioned by what looked like luminescent silk, lay a woman, but not entirely a woman. Her skin was a deep purple, the color of twilight, and seemed to shimmer with an inner light that pulsed faintly beneath the surface. Her hair, if it could be called that, flowed around her head in strands that moved like water even in stillness, shifting through shades of violet and indigo. She wore a garment that looked grown rather than woven, clinging to her form in patterns that reminded Marcus of flower petals. She was beautiful in a way that made his chest ache. She was also dying. Marcus could see it in the way her light flickered, in the shallow rise and fall of her chest, in the dark stain spreading across her side where something had torn through her strange clothing. Every instinct screamed at him to walk away. He had nothing to give. He could barely keep himself alive, but his hands were already reaching for her, already checking for a pulse at her throat. The heartbeat he found was slower than human, but steady. Her skin was surprisingly warm. Damn it, Marcus whispered to himself, to the universe, to whatever cosmic joke had brought this moment. Then he was lifting her. She was lighter than she looked and beginning the long walk back to his shelter. The greenhouse had been his home for 8 months now. Most of the glass panels were broken, but enough remained to offer shelter from the worst storms. He'd cleared out the dead plants, salvaged some tools, made it livable. It wasn't much, but it was his. Marcus laid the strange woman on his cot, his only cot, and began assessing her wound. The tear in her side was deep, but the blood, if that's what the silvery fluid was, had already begun to clot. He cleaned it carefully with his precious water, then used strips from his spare shirt to bind it. As he worked, her eyes suddenly opened. They were the color of amethyst with no visible pupil, and they fixed on him with an intensity that made him freeze. Her lips moved, forming words in a language like music, like wind through chimes. She reached up with a trembling hand and touched his face, her expression full of something that might have been wonder or might have been fear. Then her eyes closed again, and she went still. Marcus sat back, his heart racing, and realized he'd just made the first completely irrational choice he'd made in 5 years. He'd saved something beautiful when the world had forgotten what beauty was. He'd chosen hope when hope was the most dangerous thing of all. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall. The awakening. Gift Marcus woke to the sound of humming. For a moment he thought he was dreaming. It had been so long since he'd heard anything resembling music. But then his eyes adjusted to the dim light filtering through the broken greenhouse panels, and he saw her sitting upright on the cot, running her fingers through the air as if playing an invisible instrument. The purple-skinned woman turned to look at him, and this time her gaze was clear, focused. She spoke again in that melodic language, her voice rising and falling like a question. When Marcus just stared, she touched her chest with one hand. "Sonara," she said slowly, the word somehow universal. Then she pointed at him, tilting her head. "Marcus," he replied, his voice rough from disuse. "Your name is Sonara?" She nodded, a gesture that apparently transcended worlds. Then she looked down at her bandaged side and back up at him, her expression softening. She placed both hands over her heart and bowed her head. Gratitude clearly, though he didn't need words to understand it. Over the next 2 days, they began to build a bridge of communication. Sonara learned faster than should have been possible, picking up words from Marcus with an almost desperate hunger. He learned that she'd come from a place she called Valora, a world far beyond Earth's dying sun. She'd been fleeing from what? He couldn't quite grasp yet. War, maybe. Betrayal. The words weren't there yet for her to explain, but understanding came in other ways. On the 3rd morning, Marcus found her standing outside the greenhouse, her bare feet pressed against the dead earth. Her eyes were closed, and that inner light beneath her skin was pulsing brighter than before. She was whispering something in her own language, her hands extended toward the ground. "What are you doing?" Marcus asked, approaching cautiously. Sonara opened her eyes and smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. "Debt," she said carefully. "You give life. I give life." She struggled with the words, then gestured at the ground between them. "I don't understand." She knelt suddenly, pressing both palms flat against the cracked earth. Her skin began to glow brighter, the purple deepening to violet, and Marcus felt something shift in the air around them. A charge, like the moment before lightning strikes. Sonara's breathing quickened, her whole body trembling with effort. "Stop," Marcus said, reaching for her. "You're still hurt, you shouldn't—" "Please," Sonara gasped, looking up at him with those impossibly deep eyes. "Trust." Then she spoke a single word in her language, and the light poured from her hands into the earth. Marcus felt it like a physical wave, warmth flooding through his chest, spreading down into his legs, up into his head. It was intoxicating and terrifying, like falling and flying at the same time. He gasped, his knees buckling, and Sonara caught his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. The moment their skin touched, the sensation intensified. He could feel her heartbeat sinking with his, could sense the life force flowing from her into him and through him into the ground beneath their feet. Images flashed through his mind, vast gardens floating in violet skies, trees with silver leaves, flowers that sang at dawn, and then, impossibly, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. When the light finally faded, Marcus found himself on his knees beside Sonara, both of them breathing hard. She was pale, paler than her natural purple, and swaying slightly. But she was smiling as she pointed to the ground between them. A tiny green shoot had pushed through the cracked earth. Marcus stared at it, his scientific mind refusing to accept what his eyes were showing him. It was impossible. The soil was dead, had been dead for years. Nothing could grow here. Nothing. But the shoot was real, unfurling a pair of delicate leaves toward the gray sky. The breath of tethering, Sonara said softly, her hand still holding his. "We are connected now. My life is your life. Your world is my world." She touched her chest, then his. Together. Marcus looked from the impossible plant to this impossible woman, and felt something crack open inside him. Some wall he'd built to survive. Some numbness he'd wrapped around his heart to keep functioning. He reached out and cupped her face gently, his thumb tracing the high curve of her cheekbone. "Why?" he whispered. "Why give this to me?" Sonara leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. "You gave first," she said simply. "When you had nothing, you gave everything. This is how my people honor such gifts." She swayed again, and Marcus caught her, lifting her easily. She'd grown weaker from whatever she'd done, her light dimming. He carried her back into the greenhouse and laid her on the cot, but she kept hold of his hand, refusing to let go. "Stay," she whispered. "Please, I am afraid of being alone." Marcus settled beside her, their shoulders touching, their hands still intertwined. "I'm here," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." As Sonara drifted into sleep, her head gradually came to rest against his shoulder. Marcus sat there in the dying light, feeling her warmth against him, feeling something stirring in his chest that might have been attraction, or might have been something deeper. Outside, he could swear the gray sky looked a shade lighter. That night, it rained for the first time in 14 months. Marcus woke to find Sonara watching him in the darkness, her eyes glowing faintly like twin stars. She said something in her language, something that sounded like a question, like an invitation. When he didn't pull away, she moved closer, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw with a tenderness that made his breath catch. "Marcus," she whispered, testing his name on her tongue like something precious. He answered by closing the distance between them, his lips finding hers in a kiss that tasted like rain and growing things. She made a soft sound, surprise, pleasure, and her hands found their way into his hair, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, became something more desperate, more needful. They were two lost souls who'd found each other in the wasteland, and for this moment nothing else mattered. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Sonara rested her forehead against his. The light beneath her skin was pulsing brighter now, spreading warmth between them like a living thing. "This changes everything," Marcus whispered. "Yes," Sonara agreed, smiling against his lips. "Everything." Outside, in the place where their connection had taken root, that single green shoot stretched toward the sky, and beside it, another had begun to grow. Seeds of tomorrow. The world was waking up. It started small, so small Marcus almost convinced himself he was imagining it. But every morning brought new evidence. Patches of moss spreading across the greenhouse foundation, a thin film of algae greening the edges of puddles, tiny insects Marcus hadn't seen in years crawling through the damp soil. Within 2 weeks, the area around the greenhouse had transformed into something that resembled life. Sonara grew stronger each day, and so did their bond. Marcus found himself able to sense her emotions like whispers at the edge of his thoughts. Her joy when new plants emerged, her sadness when she gazed at the stars and thought of her lost home, her contentment when she sat beside him in comfortable silence, and something else, something that made his pulse quicken and his skin warm whenever she was near. They worked together, establishing a routine. Marcus shared everything he remembered about Earth's ecology. Which plants could regenerate ecosystems? Which animals once thrived in this climate? Sonara listened with rapt attention, absorbing it all, then would kneel and press her hands to the earth, channeling that mysterious energy that flowed between them. "On Valora," she said one afternoon as they planted seeds Marcus had scavenged from an abandoned research facility, "every person is connected to a garden. We grow together, live together. When one suffers, the garden suffers. When the garden blooms," she smiled, dirt smudging her purple cheek, "we all bloom." Marcus reached over and gently wiped away the smudge, his thumb lingering perhaps longer than necessary. Sonara's breath caught, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made the air between them crackle. "Is that what we're doing?" he asked quietly. "Blooming?" Instead of answering with words, Sonara leaned forward and kissed him. It was different from that first desperate kiss. This was slower, deeper, full of promise. Marcus's hands found her waist, pulling her closer, and she came willingly, eagerly, her fingers tangling in his hair. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Yes," Sonara whispered against his mouth. "We are blooming." That night, they made love under the broken glass ceiling of the greenhouse, surrounded by the green things they'd coaxed back to life. Sonara's skin glowed in the darkness, illuminating their space with soft purple light. She was patient and curious, learning the geography of his body with the same careful attention she gave to understanding Earth. Marcus discovered that when she was aroused, the light beneath her skin pulsed in waves that matched her heartbeat, and that she made sounds like singing when he touched her in certain ways. Afterward, they lay tangled together on blankets spread across the greenhouse floor, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her shoulder. "Tell me about Valora," Marcus said softly. "Tell me what you left behind." Sonara was quiet for a long moment. "My world is dying too," she finally said. "Not like yours, not from neglect, from war. The Keepers and the Seekers have fought for generations over how to use the old power, the life force that connects all Valorians. I was a keeper, a guardian of the sacred gardens, but the Seekers wanted to weaponize what should only heal. Her voice grew heavy. I tried to stop them, I failed. So I ran. Marcus held her tighter. I'm sorry. Don't be. Sonara tilted her head to look at him, her eyes luminous in the dark. If I hadn't run, I would never have crashed here. Never have found you. Never have learned that broken things can heal each other. She kissed his chest right over his heart, and Marcus felt that now familiar warmth spread through him. But this time it was different, stronger, more purposeful. He sat up slightly, looking down at her in alarm. What are you doing? Sharing, Sonara said simply. All of me with all of you, if you want it. Sonara, you're already weak from everything you've been giving to the land. You can't— I can choose, she interrupted, her voice firm. And I choose you. I choose this. She placed her hand over his heart. Do you choose me? Marcus looked at her. This impossible, beautiful woman who'd fallen into his dying world and given him reasons to believe in tomorrow. He thought about the careful walls he'd built around his heart, the numbness he'd cultivated to survive. All of it was crumbling, and for once he wasn't afraid of the fall. Yes, he said, I choose you. The light that poured from Sonara then was blinding. It flooded through Marcus like a river breaking through a dam, filling every empty space inside him, healing wounds he hadn't even known were there. He gasped, his back arching, and Sonara held him through it, whispering words of comfort in her musical language. When it finally subsided, Marcus felt fundamentally changed. He could sense the life force of every plant in the greenhouse, could feel the pulse of returning vitality in the soil beneath them. And beneath it all, woven through everything, was Sonara. Her presence, her essence, twined so thoroughly with his own that he couldn't tell where he ended and she began. We are truly tethered now, Sonara said, tears streaming down her face. Though whether from joy or pain, Marcus couldn't tell, until the end. They held each other as dawn broke, as the first rays of sunlight in months pierced the thinning clouds and fell across their intertwined bodies. Outside, the green was spreading faster now, fed by their connection. Within a month there would be flowers. Within 2 fruit trees, the world was remembering how to live. But neither of them could have known that their blooming would draw attention from the sky. That Valora's ships were already searching the galaxies for their lost keeper. That soon Marcus would have to make a choice that would define the fate of 2 worlds. For now, though, there was only this, the warmth of skin against skin, the steady rhythm of shared heartbeats, and the sound of rain falling on new leaves. The choice between worlds. The first ship appeared on a Tuesday morning, though Marcus had long since stopped tracking days with any real precision. He was tending to the tomato plants, actual tomatoes, red and heavy with juice, when Sonara suddenly gasped and dropped the watering can she'd been holding. They've found me, she whispered, her face going pale. Marcus looked up to see what she was staring at. High above, cutting through the clouds like a blade, was something that made the hair on his neck stand up. The vessel was enormous, shaped like a teardrop or perhaps a seed, its surface rippling with the same iridescent quality as Sonara's crashed pod. More ships followed, 3, 5, 7 of them, descending through the atmosphere in perfect formation. Within an hour, people began arriving at the greenhouse. Marcus hadn't realized how many survivors had settled nearby, drawn by the impossible green that had spread from his shelter like a miracle. There was old Carmen from the water treatment plant, the Rodriguez brothers who'd been scavenging in the eastern ruins, a young woman named G who'd walked 3 days from the coast after hearing rumors of growing things. They all stood together now, watching the sky as the largest ship descended into the valley a mile away. Sonara's hand found Marcus's, gripping tight enough to hurt. I have to go to them, she said, her voice shaking. They won't hurt anyone. Valorians don't make war on other species. But they've come for me. They need me. Why? Marcus asked, though part of him already knew the answer. Because I'm a keeper of the 7th garden, Sonara said quietly. One of only 12 left alive. Without us, the peace treaties cannot be renewed. Without the treaties, she closed her eyes. The war will consume everything. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. So you're not just a refugee. You're important. Your people need you to stop a war. Yes. They stood in silence as a smaller craft detached from the main ship and began moving toward the greenhouse. Marcus became aware of the others watching them. Carmen with her weathered face and knowing eyes. The Rodriguez brothers whispering to each other. Trip with her hand over her mouth. You have to go, Marcus said, and was surprised by how steady his voice sounded. despite the breaking happening inside him. You have to save your world. Marcus, no, listen. He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. You gave me everything. You gave all of us everything. Look around, we have food growing. We have hope. You healed this place just by being here. Now your people need that same healing. Tears were streaming down Sonara's face, leaving trails of silver. But the tether, Marcus, we're connected. If I leave, if I go too far. She pressed her hand to his chest, then to her own. It will hurt. For both of us. I know. You could die. The connection sustains you now, feeds your life force. Without me here, I know. Marcus repeated and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight he could feel her double heartbeat against his chest. But your entire world could die if you don't go. That's not really a choice, is it? The smaller craft landed in the clearing they'd prepared for planting corn. The door opened with that same soft exhalation Marcus remembered from Sonara's pod, and 3 figures emerged. They were all Valorian, 2 with skin in shades of deep blue, 1 in green like jade. They wore garments that shifted and flowed as if alive, and they moved with a grace that made them seem to float rather than walk. The green-skinned one, a woman, Marcus thought, though it was hard to be sure, approached with her hands raised in what was clearly a peaceful gesture. She spoke in that musical language, and Sonara replied, her voice breaking on every other word. The conversation went on for several minutes, and Marcus didn't need to understand the words to grasp what was being said. Pleading, explaining, refusing, insisting. Finally, Sonara turned back to Marcus, and he saw the decision written on her face before she spoke. They're willing to wait 3 days, she said. 3 days for us to say goodbye properly, to prepare. After that, they must return. The treaty window is closing. 3 days. 72 hours. It seemed like forever and no time at all. The Valorians returned to their craft, and the crowd that had gathered slowly dispersed. Though not before Carmen squeezed Marcus's shoulder and whispered, "Make them count, son." That night, Marcus and Sonara didn't speak much. They lay together in the greenhouse, skin to skin, trying to memorize every detail. The way her light pulsed slower when she was sad. The sound she made when he kissed the curve of her neck. The weight of her head on his shoulder. The way their breathing synchronized without effort. "I love you," Marcus said into the darkness. "I don't know if your people have that concept or if it translates, but that's what this is. I love you, Sonara." She was quiet for so long he thought she might have fallen asleep. Then, we have a word. Velshara. It means root of roots, the deepest connection. The one that feeds all others. Yes, Marcus, I love you too. Velshara. They made love slowly, tenderly, as if they could somehow store the sensation for the lonely years ahead. Sonara's light filled the greenhouse until it looked like they were drowning in stars. When they finished, she wept against his chest while he held her and tried not to think about how empty his arms would feel in 3 days. The next morning, they worked together in desperate silence, planting as many seeds as they could. Marcus taught Z and the Rodriguez brothers how to tend the growing things, shared everything he remembered about crop rotation and soil management. Sonara walked the perimeter of their green sanctuary, pressing her hands to the earth at intervals, leaving deposits of her energy like buried treasures. It will sustain the growth for months, she told Marcus, maybe years. And your connection to me, even weakened by distance, should allow you to sense what the plants need. You'll be able to continue this work. Should, Marcus repeated hollowly. Maybe. On the second night, they didn't sleep at all. They talked instead about everything and nothing. Sonara told him about the floating gardens of her youth, where trees grew upside down with their roots in the clouds. Marcus described the Amazon rainforest he'd visited as a graduate student, before the fires consumed it. They shared their fears and hopes and dreams, weaving their stories together as if by speaking them aloud they could make them permanent. Come with me, Sonara said suddenly, just before dawn. Come to Valora. You could help us. Your knowledge of Earth's ecosystems could teach us new ways to heal our world. And we'd be together. Marcus had been expecting this, dreading it. I can't. Why not? Because someone has to stay here. He gestured at the green spreading beyond the greenhouse, at the sleeping forms of Carmen and Z and the others who'd begun building shelters nearby. This is just the beginning, Sonara. Earth needs someone who understands both the science and the magic you've taught me. If I leave, all of this could die. If you stay, you could die. Maybe. Marcus pulled her close, breathing in her scent, like ozone and honey. But it's my world, my people. I can't abandon them any more than you can abandon yours. Sonara nodded against his chest, and he felt her tears soaking through his shirt. I know. I wish, me too. The third day arrived too quickly, dressed in a dawn so beautiful it hurt to look at. The sky was clear for the first time in years, painted in shades of pink and gold that Marcus had almost forgotten existed. The Valorian ships hung in the air like patient guardians waiting. The entire settlement gathered to watch Sonara leave. She'd changed into a garment the Valorians had brought, something that looked grown from flower petals and starlight. Her hair flowed around her head in those impossible waves, catching the morning light. She looked like what she was, something too beautiful, too otherworldly for a dying planet. But her eyes, those amethyst eyes, were only for Marcus. They stood facing each other, hands clasped as the smaller craft landed once more. The green-skinned Valorian waited by the entrance, patient and solemn. There's one more thing I can give you, Sonara said quietly. One more choice. The tether between us, I can make it permanent, unbreakable regardless of distance. But if I do, she took a shaking breath, you would have to come with me eventually. Maybe not today, maybe not for years, but one day, when Earth is truly healed, you would have to leave it. Come to Valora. Help me there as I helped you here. We would never be apart again. Marcus felt the weight of the choice settle over him like a physical thing. Stay on Earth forever, watch the tether weaken and fade, live with the pain of losing her, or accept this gift. Continue his work here knowing that one day he'd have to leave it all behind. Trust that others could carry on what they'd started. He looked past Sonara at the people gathered around them, at the green pushing through dead Earth, at the sky that was slowly remembering how to be blue. Then he looked back at her, at this woman who'd crashed into his life and taught him that broken things could heal each other. Do it, he said. Make it permanent. Sonara's face transformed with joy and relief. She pulled him close and kissed him deeply, pouring everything she had into it, love and gratitude and promise. When she pulled back, her hands were glowing, bright as small suns. This will hurt, she warned. I don't care. She placed one glowing hand over his heart and one over her own. Then she spoke a single word in Valorian and the world turned white. Pain lanced through Marcus like lightning, branching through every nerve. But beneath the pain was something else. A sensation of being unmade and remade, of bonds forging at the deepest level of his being. He felt Sonara in his blood, his bones, his breath, felt her life force twining with his own until they became a single cord, strong as steel and flexible as silk. When the light faded, Marcus was on his knees, gasping. Sonara knelt beside him, equally breathless but smiling through her tears. It's done, she whispered. Wherever I am, you'll feel me. And one day when your work here is finished, you'll come find me. Yes? Yes, Marcus promised. I'll come find you. They kissed one more time, soft and slow and bittersweet. Then Sonara stood and walked toward the waiting craft, her hand trailing from his until the last possible moment. At the entrance, she turned back, raised her hand in farewell, and spoke across the distance between them. Velshara, Marcus Thorne. Velshara Sonara, he called back, and watched as she disappeared into the ship. The craft rose slowly, gracefully, joining the larger vessels in the sky. Marcus stood with his hand over his heart, feeling her presence there like a second heartbeat, feeling the distance stretch between them like a living thing. It hurt, God, it hurt, but it didn't break. The tether held. As the ships disappeared into the clouds, Marcus felt something else. Determination. He had work to do, a world to heal, and one day, when Earth could sustain itself without him, he had a promise to keep and a woman to find among the stars. Carmen appeared at his elbow, her weathered hand finding his shoulder. She'll wait for you, she said quietly, and we'll make sure you can go to her when it's time. Marcus nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Around him the others stood silent, bearing witness. Above them the sky was the clearest it had been in a decade. The work was just beginning. The Covenant of Hope 10 years passed like a dream. Marcus stood at the edge of what had once been the Ashlands and was now the Verde Valley Agricultural Cooperative. 300 acres of thriving crops, orchards and restored wetlands. He was older now, His dark hair shot through with gray at the temples, his face weathered by sun and wind. But his eyes were clear, and when he pressed his hand to his chest, he could still feel her. That steady pulse that told him Sonara was alive, somewhere among the stars thinking of him. The settlement had grown beyond anything he'd imagined. What started as a handful of survivors at the greenhouse had become a community of over 2,000. Carmen had organized a council. The Rodriguez brothers had established trade routes with other emerging settlements. She had become the lead agricultural engineer, training dozens of others in the techniques Marcus and Sonara had pioneered. But the real miracle was the land itself. From the single green shoot that had pushed through dead earth, life had spread like wildfire. Not just in the valley, but beyond it. Birds had returned. Actual birds, not the mutated scavengers they'd become accustomed to. The river ran clear again. Children played in meadows that had been dust bowls a decade ago. Earth was healing. Marcus felt the familiar tug in his chest, stronger than usual. He pressed his hand there, closing his eyes, and felt Sonara's presence like sunlight breaking through clouds. She was calling to him across the stars. Not with words, but with emotion. Urgency, need, hope. It was time. I know, he whispered to the wind, to the bond that connected them. I'm ready. That evening, Marcus called a meeting of the council. They gathered in the great hall they'd built from reclaimed materials, a structure that was part greenhouse, part community center, with living walls and a ceiling that let in the starlight. I'm leaving, Marcus announced without preamble. The Valorians are returning, and I'm going with them. The room erupted in protests and questions, but Carmen silenced them with a sharp whistle. Let him speak, she commanded. Marcus took a breath. 10 years ago, Sonara and I made a covenant. She would return to her world and work for peace. I would stay here and continue healing Earth. And when the work here could sustain itself without me, I would join her on Valora. He looked around at the faces he'd come to know so well. The work here can sustain itself now. You don't need me anymore. That's not true, she said, her voice breaking. You're the one who understands the connection, the life force. No, Marcus interrupted gently. You all understand it now. Maybe not the way I do, but enough. You've learned to listen to the land, to sense what it needs. The tether Sonara and I share, it taught me, but it also taught everyone I've worked with. The knowledge is spreading naturally now. Carmen stood, her aged eyes sharp. This is about more than knowledge, isn't it? She needs you. Something's wrong on Valora. Marcus nodded slowly. The war there never fully ended. The peace Sonara helped broker has been holding, but barely. She thinks, he pressed his hand to his chest again. She thinks I can help. That Earth's example, our healing, could teach the Valorians something they've forgotten. It's a long shot, but you love her, Carmen finished. And love makes long shots worth taking. Yes, the council debated for hours, but Marcus had expected that. Some argued he should stay. That Earth's healing was too fragile, too new. Others insisted he'd earned the right to choose his own path. In the end, it was unanimous, not because they all agreed it was the right choice, but because they all agreed it was his choice to make. 3 days later, the Valorian ships returned. This time there were only 2, and they descended not with the cautious distance of diplomats, but with the eager speed of reunion. Marcus stood in the same spot where he'd said goodbye to Sonara a decade ago, his single-packed bag at his feet. The entire settlement had turned out to see him off. Thousands of people whose lives had been transformed by the work he and Sonara had started together. The smaller craft landed, and the door opened. Sonara stepped out. Marcus's breath caught. She looked almost exactly as he remembered. The same purple skin, the same flowing hair, the same amethyst eyes. But there were changes too. She moved with a weariness that hadn't been there before, and her light seemed dimmer, as if she'd been burning too bright for too long. When their eyes met across the distance, he felt the tether between them sing like a plucked string. They ran to each other. The embrace was desperate, all-consuming. Marcus buried his face in her neck, breathing her in, relearning the feel of her in his arms. Sonara was shaking, her hands clutching at his back as if afraid he might disappear. Velshara, she whispered against his ear, and the word sounded like coming home. I'm here, Marcus said. I'm here and I'm staying. When they finally pulled apart, Sonara cupped his face in her hands, her eyes searching his. You've aged, she said softly, but beautifully. Like trees age, stronger, deeper rooted. You look tired, Marcus replied with equal honesty. What's happening on Valora? Sinara's expression darkened. Walk with me. I'll explain. They moved away from the crowd, hands clasped following the path through the orchards Marcus had planted. Sinara spoke quietly, her voice heavy with the weight of 10 years' worth of struggle. The peace she'd helped broker had held, but barely. The Seekers and Keepers had agreed to a truce, but neither side truly trusted the other. The sacred gardens that sustained Valorian life were failing, damaged by generations of war. Her people were surviving but not thriving. They were caught in the same trap Earth had been, so focused on fighting each other that they'd forgotten how to heal. We need a new way, Sinara said, stopping beneath an apple tree heavy with fruit. Not the Keeper way or the Seeker way, but something different, something that honors both preservation and growth. She looked up at him. Something like what you and I built here. Marcus understood. You want me to help you create a bridge. Show them that the two philosophies don't have to be at war. Yes, but it's more than that. Sinara placed her hand over his heart. The tether between us, it's been sustaining both our worlds. Every bit of healing here has sent ripples to Valora. Every success we've had in brokering peace has strengthened your work here. We're proof that different worlds, different species, different ways of thinking can weave together into something stronger than either alone. That's a lot of pressure to put on one relationship, Marcus said with a weak smile. Sinara laughed, the first genuine laugh he'd heard from her since she arrived. Good thing it's a strong relationship. Marcus pulled her close and kissed her, slow and deep, trying to communicate everything he'd felt over the past decade of separation. When they broke apart, both were glowing, his skin lit from within by the tether's power, her natural luminescence brightening to match. There's one more thing, Sinara said quietly. If you come to Valora, if you help us, you may never be able to return to Earth. The journey is long and you're human. Your lifespan can be extended, Marcus interrupted. By the tether, by you. I've felt it, Sinara. I should have aged more than this. The connection has been keeping me young, keeping me strong. As long as we're together, I'll live as long as you do. That could be centuries. Good, Marcus said firmly. That's centuries we get to spend together. Centuries to keep healing broken things. Sinara's eyes filled with silver tears. You're sure? This is forever, Marcus. Forever, forever. He thought about Earth, about the settlement that would continue his work. He thought about the sky that was blue again, the rivers that ran clear. He thought about all the broken people who'd found hope in green things growing. Then he thought about Sinara, about 10 years of feeling her heartbeat echoing alongside his own, about the work still waiting to be done, about the future they could build together. I'm sure, he said. Take me home. Home, Sinara repeated as if testing the word. Then she smiled, radiant, joyful, full of promise. Yes, let's go home. They walked back to the ship hand in hand, and the settlement cheered as they passed. Carmen pressed a package into Marcus's hands, seeds from Earth carefully preserved. For their gardens, she said gruffly. Show them what home looks like. The Rodriguez brothers gave him a handmade compass, its needle pointing not north but toward wherever Sinara stood. So you never lose your way, they said. She simply hugged him tight and whispered, Thank you for teaching us that broken doesn't mean finished. As they boarded the craft, Marcus turned back for one last look at the green valley, at the settlement that had grown from despair into hope. Then Sinara's hand tightened around his and he turned toward the future instead. The ship rose into the air, smooth and silent. Through the transparent walls, Marcus watched Earth fall away, his beautiful, battered, healing planet. He pressed his hand to the wall in farewell, in gratitude, in promise. Behind him, Sinara wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her head against his back. No regrets? She asked softly. Marcus covered her hands with his, feeling the tether between them pulse with light and life and love. Below, he could see the green spreading, forests reclaiming wasteland, crops feeding hungry settlements, hope taking root in soil that had forgotten how to sustain it. No regrets, he said. We're not finished yet. We've just got a bigger garden to tend. As the ship broke through the atmosphere and into the star-scattered darkness of space, Marcus felt something settle in his chest, a sense of rightness, of purpose, of destiny fulfilled and simultaneously just beginning. He was leaving one world behind but carrying its lessons forward. He'd helped heal Earth. Now he would help heal Valora. And maybe, just maybe, he and Sinara would show the universe that love could bridge any distance. reconcile any difference, bloom in any soil, no matter how broken. The last thing he saw before the ship engaged its faster-than-light drive was Earth, whole and blue and beautiful against the darkness, a reminder of what broken things could become when someone refused to give up on them. Then the stars blurred into lines of light, and they were gone. Two souls bound by an unbreakable tether racing toward tomorrow together.